Celebrating your struggles. When you tell them about a promotion, they give you a quick "that's great" and change the subject. But when you mention you're stressed about work or had a fight with your partner, suddenly they're fully engaged, asking questions, wanting all the details. They lean in when you're struggling and lean out when you're thriving. And here's the thing, real friends don't get more excited about your problems than your victories. This pattern shows up in subtle ways. They'll remember every detail of your breakup, but forget you got that job you wanted. They offer sympathy that feels almost satisfied. Like they're concerned, sure, but there's this undertone of relief or even pleasure. It's not that they're wishing terrible things on you. It's that your struggles make them feel better about their own life. Your pain levels the playing field in their mind. What's happening here is comparison and envy dressed up as friendship. When you succeed, it triggers their insecurities. They start measuring their life against yours and coming up short. But when you're struggling, that discomfort disappears. They can be the supportive friend, the one who has it together, the one offering advice. Your difficulty gives them a psychological boost they're not getting from your success. The problem is this creates a dynamic where they're unconsciously rooting against you. They won't sabotage you directly, but they're not genuinely hoping you win either. And over time, you'll start to notice you don't feel safe sharing good news with them. You'll downplay your achievements or avoid mentioning them altogether because you've learned their reaction will make you feel worse, not better. Constant competition. You mention you started learning guitar and suddenly they're signing up for lessons too. You share that you're training for a marathon and they're like, "Oh, I've actually been thinking about doing an ultra marathon." You get a new job and within days they're casually mentioning they got a better offer. Everything you do becomes a starting point for them to do it bigger, better, or first. And it's exhausting because you can't just exist without it turning into an unspoken competition. This isn't inspiration or shared interests. It's one-upping disguised as enthusiasm. They're not joining you in activities because they genuinely want to connect. They're positioning themselves to outperform you or claim they did it first. They'll take your idea, run with it, and then act like they came up with it independently. Or they'll copy what you're doing and then subtly imply you're copying them. The psychology here is pretty straightforward. They're deeply insecure and using you as a measuring stick for their own worth. Every achievement you have feels like a threat to their status or identity. So instead of being happy for you, they need to prove they're equally or more successful. It's not really about the guitar or the marathon. It's about maintaining a sense of superiority or at least equality in a relationship that feels competitive to them but not to you. What makes this damaging is that it turns your friendship into an invisible race you never agreed to run. You can't share anything without it becoming fodder for comparison. And eventually you'll start editing yourself around them, keeping your goals and wins private because you know they'll either diminish them or try to outdo them. That's not friendship. That's just someone using you to boost their ego. Convenience-based presence. They disappear for weeks, maybe months. Your texts get one-word replies or left unread. They're always too busy to grab coffee or catch up, but the second they need something, your phone lights up with a long message or a sudden call. Maybe they need a ride, or they're going through a breakup and need emotional support, or they want an introduction to someone you know. And boom, suddenly you're their best friend again. Until the crisis passes, then they're gone. This is transactional friendship, and it's one of the clearest signs someone sees you as a resource rather than a person they actually value. Real friends show up when things are boring, when there's nothing to gain, when it's just existing together without a purpose. But these people, they're only present when you're useful. The rest of the time, you don't register on their radar. The reason people accept this pattern is usually because the person is charming or fun when they do show up. They make you feel special in the moment, like you're the only one who can help them or understand them, and that feels good. So you overlook the fact that they've been MIA for months. You tell yourself they're just busy or going through something. But here's the thing, everyone is busy. People make time for what matters to them. If you only matter when they're in crisis, you don't actually matter. Pay attention to the pattern over 6 months. Are they reaching out to check in, or are they only reaching out to ask for something? Do they celebrate your wins, or do they only appear when they need support? If the friendship only exists on their terms and for their benefit, that's not a friendship. That's someone keeping you on standby for when you're convenient. Trading your secrets. You tell them something personal, something you're not sharing publicly. Maybe it's about your relationship, your job, your family, your mental health, and you trust them with it because that's what friends do. Then you find out, either directly or through someone else, that they've been sharing your business. Not maliciously, necessarily. They frame it as concern or bonding. I probably shouldn't tell you this, and suddenly, your private struggle is their conversation starter. This is one of the most insidious betrayals because it doesn't feel like betrayal in the moment. They're not spreading rumors or trying to hurt you. They're using your vulnerability as social currency. Sharing your secrets makes them feel closer to other people, gives them something interesting to talk about, positions them as the friend who's in the know. Your trust becomes their leverage for building building connections elsewhere. What's happening psychologically is they're prioritizing social status over loyalty. They get a hit of validation or importance from having insider information, and that temporary boost feels better to them than protecting your privacy. It's not that they don't care about you at all. It's that they care more about how sharing your story benefits them in the moment, and they'll rationalize it by telling themselves they're venting or seeking advice, or that it's not that big of a deal. The problem is it destroys trust completely. Once you realize your private life isn't private with them, you can't be vulnerable anymore. You start filtering everything you say, keeping them at arm's length emotionally. And that's the death of real intimacy in a friendship. If you want to test this, tell them something specific and mildly personal, then see if it makes its way back to you through someone else. If it does, you'll know exactly where you stand. By the way, if you're finding this helpful, I post content like this regularly. I'd appreciate if you subscribed. Thanks. Public undermining. In private, they're supportive. They listen, they validate, they agree with you. But put them in a group setting and suddenly they're making jokes at your expense. They'll laugh off your opinions, tell embarrassing stories about you, or drop little comments that make you look foolish or less competent. And when you bring it up later, they act confused. I was just joking. You're being too sensitive. Everyone does that. This is social undermining, and it's about power and positioning. In private, there's no audience, so there's nothing to gain from putting you down. But in front of others, making you the butt of the joke elevates their status. It makes them look funnier, smarter, more confident. They're using you as a stepping stone to seem more impressive to the group. And they're counting on you not calling them out publicly because that would make you look like you can't take a joke. The psychology behind this usually involves insecurity and a need for validation from others. They feel threatened by you in some way. Maybe you're funnier, more liked, more confident, and they need to level the playing field. So they take subtle shots that chip away at your credibility or likability. It's not always conscious, but it's always calculated. They know exactly what they're doing, even if they won't admit it. What makes this particularly damaging is that it trains you to second guess yourself in social situations. You start wondering if you should speak up, share your thoughts, or tell that story because you know they might twist it into something that makes you look bad. You become smaller around them to avoid being the target, and that's exactly what they want, consciously or not. Real friends build you up in public and address issues in private. Fake friends do the opposite. Friendship scorekeeping. They help you move once, and now, 3 years later, they're still bringing it up anytime you can't do them a favor. Remember when I drove you to the airport? I was there for you when you were going through that breakup. They keep a running tally of everything they've done for you, and they cash it in whenever they need something or whenever you set a boundary. It's like friendship debt collection, and you never quite pay it off. This is transactional thinking at its worst. Healthy friendships operate on generosity and reciprocity that doesn't need to be tracked. You help because you want to, not because you're building leverage for later. But these people, they're keeping receipts. Every favor is an investment they expect a return on with interest, and they'll hold it over your head to guilt you into doing things you don't want to do or to make you feel like you're the bad friend if you say no. What's usually happening here is they see relationships as exchanges rather than connections. They might have grown up in an environment where love was conditional, where care had to be earned or repaid, or they're just controlling and manipulative, using past kindness as a tool to maintain power in the relationship. Either way, it turns friendship into obligation, and that's suffocating. The problem is you start feeling like you can never do enough. You're perpetually indebted, always one favor short of being square, and that's by design. They don't want you to feel equal in the friendship because then they lose control. Real friendship doesn't keep score. If you find yourself constantly reminded of what you owe someone, that's not care. That's coercion with a smile. Possessive friendship, you mention hanging out with someone else and suddenly their mood shifts. They make passive-aggressive comments like, "Oh, you have time for them but not for me," or "Glad you found someone better to talk to." They ask pointed questions about your other friends, fishing for details they can use to criticize or diminish those relationships, or they straight up exclude you from things as punishment for having other connections. It's friendship jealousy, and it's as toxic as romantic jealousy. This behavior comes from insecurity and a need for control. They want to be your only close friend, your primary source of connection and validation. When you have other meaningful relationships, it threatens their position. They worry you'll realize you don't need them as much as they need you to need them. So they try to isolate you subtly or overtly by making you feel guilty for having a social life that doesn't revolve around them. The psychology here often involves anxious attachment or abandonment fears. They learned early that people leave, so they try to lock you down by being your everything. But that's not healthy interdependence. That's codependency with a possessive edge. They're not trying to build a strong friendship. They're trying to monopolize your emotional resources so you don't have the capacity to invest elsewhere. What makes this damaging is it stifles your growth and limits your support support system. Healthy people want you to have multiple close relationships because they know connection is good for you. Insecure people want you isolated because it keeps you dependent. If someone consistently makes you feel bad for having other friends, they're not protecting the friendship, they're protecting their access to you. And that's a massive red flag. One-sided support, you're stressed about something real, work pressure, relationship issues, family drama, and when you try to talk to them, they minimize it. That's not that bad. At least you don't have to deal with what I'm going through. You're overreacting. But when they have a problem, even a minor one, it's a full-blown crisis, and you're expected to drop everything, listen for hours, validate every feeling, and offer unwavering support. The emotional labor is completely one-sided. This is classic narcissistic behavior in friendship. Your pain doesn't matter because it's not about them. But their pain? That's the most important thing in the world, and you're supposed to treat it accordingly. They can't hold space for your emotions because they're too consumed with their own. Or worse, your struggles make them uncomfortable because it requires them to think about someone other than themselves, and they're not interested in doing that work. What's happening here is they see you as a supporting character in their story, not the main character of your own. Your role is to provide comfort, advice, and validation when they need it. Your needs are inconvenient distractions from the real plot, which is their life and feelings. It's emotional exploitation dressed up as friendship, and it leaves you feeling invisible and unimportant. The cost of this dynamic is you'll stop sharing your struggles with them altogether. You'll learn that opening up leads to dismissal or gets turned back into a conversation about them, so you'll keep your problems to yourself, and that's lonely. Friendship is supposed to be mutual support, not a one-way emotional helpline. If you're always the listener and never the heard, you're not in a friendship. You're in an unpaid therapy session for someone who refuses to return the favor. Real friendship isn't about keeping people around who drain you, compete with you, or only show up when it's convenient for them. It's about finding people who celebrate your wins, respect your boundaries, protect your secrets, and genuinely want the best for you, even when it doesn't benefit them. If this resonated with you, consider subscribing so you don't miss future uploads. Thanks for watching.